The haunting of Blackwood The haunting of Blackwood Manor nestled deep within the fog-draped forests of New England stood Blackwood Manor, a grand yet forlorn estate whose stone walls and towering turrets had witnessed the passage of centuries. Its history was steeped in tales of sorrow, betrayal, and inexplicable tragedies, leaving it abandoned and untouched for decades. The story begins with the arrival of the Thorne family: Jack, his wife Emily, and their two children, Lily and Sam. Drawn by the allure of restoring the old manor to its former glory, they purchased Blackwood Manor, unaware of the dark secrets that lurked within its walls. Chapter 1. The Thornes arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, the golden hues of the trees casting a warm glow on the imposing facade of the manor. Despite its dilapidated state, Emily saw the potential for beauty, and Jack was captivated by the history that seeped from every crevice. Their first night was uneventful, the silence of the manor broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. However, as the weeks passed, subtle disturbances began to unsettle their peaceful life. Footsteps echoed in empty hallways, whispers fluttered through the rooms, and shadows seemed to dance just out of sight. Chapter 2. The discovery curiosity got the better of Jack, and he delved into the history of Blackwood Manor. He uncovered the tragic story of the Blackwood family, who had lived there centuries before. The family had been prosperous until a series of mysterious deaths plagued them. The eldest daughter, Eliza, was said to have gone mad and vanished without a trace, and it was her spirit that was believed to haunt the manor. One rainy evening, while exploring the attic, Jack found Eliza's diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The entries revealed her descent into madness, fueled by grief and anger over her family's demise. She wrote of hearing voices and seeing apparitions, describing them in detail that mirrored the experiences the Thornes were beginning to face. Chapter 3. The hauntings intensify. As the hauntings grew more intense, Lily and Sam were the first to feel the full brunt of the supernatural presence. Lily would wake up screaming, claiming to see a lady in white standing by her bed, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Sam began talking to an invisible friend named Eliza, who he insisted was very real. Emily, initially skeptical, couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. She noticed objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and the chilling cold spots that seemed to follow her. One night, she heard a music box playing a haunting melody. Following the sound, she discovered it was coming from a hidden room behind a false wall in the library. Inside, she found Eliza's belongings, preserved as if she had just left. Chapter 4. The seance. Desperate for answers, the Thornes invited a renowned psychic, Madame Isabella, to the manor. Isabella conducted a seance in the grand dining hall, hoping to communicate with the restless spirits. As she entered a trance, the air grew thick with a palpable energy. Isabella spoke in a voice not her own, identifying herself as Eliza. She revealed the truth about her family's demise, blaming it on a dark force that had cursed them. She warned that the same force now threatened the Thornes and urged them to leave before it was too late. The seance ended abruptly as Isabella was violently thrown across the room, leaving the family in a state of shock. Chapter 5. The hidden crypt. Determined to uncover the source of the curse, Jack continued his research. He learned of an ancient crypt beneath the manor, said to be the resting place of an unknown entity linked to the dark force Eliza had mentioned. With trepidation, the family ventured into the crypt, guided by Isabella, who had recovered from the seance. The crypt was a labyrinth of tunnels, filled with ancient symbols and eerie statues. At its heart, they found a stone sarcophagus adorned with cryptic runes. As they approached, a malevolent presence filled the air, and the temperature plummeted. Jack deciphered the runes, which spoke of an ancient evil bound by blood and sacrifice. Chapter 6. The final confrontation. Realizing the only way to break the curse was to confront the entity, the family prepared for a final battle. Armed with knowledge and artifacts they had discovered, they returned to the crypt. As they began a ritual to banish the spirit, the ground shook, and the entity emerged from the sarcophagus, a shadowy figure with burning eyes. Lily and Sam, displaying bravery beyond their years, assisted their parents in holding the entity at bay. Emily, drawing upon a newfound inner strength, recited the incantation that would seal the entity away. With a final, deafening roar, the shadow dissipated, and the crypt fell silent. Chapter 7. The aftermath. Of thorns emerged from the crypt, weary but victorious. The oppressive atmosphere that had once enveloped Blackwood Manor lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. The hauntings ceased, and the manor began to feel like a home once more. As they settled back into their lives, the thorns reflected on their harrowing ordeal. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged stronger, united by their love and determination. Blackwood Manor, once a place of sorrow, now stood as a testament to their resilience. Years later, the manor flourished under the care of the Thorns, its dark past transformed into a tale of redemption and hope. The story of their bravery became a legend, a reminder that even the darkest of places can be filled with light if one dares to confront the shadows within. The haunting of Ravenwood Cabin. Prologue. In the dense, untamed woods of northern Maine stood an old, decrepit cabin known as Ravenwood. The locals avoided it, their stories rife with ominous warnings and spine-chilling encounters. It was said that the cabin had once belonged to a reclusive man named Edgar Blackwood, whose mysterious disappearance 50 years ago marked the beginning of Ravenwood's dark legend. Chapter 1. The arrival. John and Sarah Peterson, a young couple looking for a weekend escape from the hustle and bustle of city life, rented Ravenwood Cabin on the recommendation of an enthusiastic realtor. Ignoring the local legends, they were drawn by the allure of a secluded retreat amidst nature's beauty. They arrived on a late Friday afternoon, the sun casting long shadows through the towering pines. The cabin, though weathered by time, had a rustic charm that appealed to them. Inside, it was cozy, with a large stone fireplace, wooden beams, and antique furniture. As night fell, the couple settled in, unaware of the eerie presence that had begun to stir. Chapter 2. Their first night was filled with the sounds of the forest. The hooting of an owl, the rustling of leaves, and the distant howl of a wolf. However, as the hours crept by, the atmosphere changed. Sarah awoke to a faint whispering, indistinct yet persistent. She shook John awake, but the whispers ceased, leaving him skeptical and her unnerved. The next morning, they explored the woods, marveling at the beauty of the untouched wilderness. They found a stream nearby and spent the day fishing and hiking. The tranquility of the day dispelled Sarah's unease, and by evening, they were back at the cabin, enjoying a hearty meal by the fireplace. Chapter 3. Unsettling discoveries. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. This time, John heard them too. He got up to investigate, but found nothing amiss. However, they discovered an old, dusty book on the mantelpiece that neither remembered seeing before. The book was a journal, filled with the ramblings of Edgar Blackwood. The entries spoke of strange occurrences, ghostly apparitions, and a growing paranoia. Edgar wrote about a shadowy figure that haunted him, whispering secrets and driving him to the brink of madness. As they read, the temperature in the cabin dropped, and they felt a presence watching them. Chapter 4. The Shadow Man. Following day, John and Sarah decided to explore the history of Ravenwood Cabin. They visited the nearest town and spoke to the locals. An elderly man named Mr. Thompson, who had lived there all his life, shared the story of Edgar Blackwood. He described Edgar as a brilliant yet troubled man who had withdrawn from society after his wife's death. Edgar became obsessed with the supernatural, claiming that a malevolent entity was tormenting him. One day, he vanished without a trace, and no one had seen him since. Back at the cabin, John and Sarah's sense of unease grew. That night, as they lay in bed, they saw him. A tall, shadowy figure standing at the foot of their bed. His eyes glowed a sinister red, and the whispers filled the room, louder than ever. Frozen in fear, they watched as the figure slowly dissipated into the darkness. Chapter 5. The warning. Determined to uncover the truth, John and Sarah delved deeper into Edgar's journal. The final entries were frantic, describing a ritual to banish the entity, a desperate last attempt to free himself. Edgar had drawn a protective circle in the cabin's basement and inscribed ancient symbols, but his writings ended abruptly, leaving his fate a mystery. The couple decided to search the basement. They found it cluttered with old furniture and cobwebs. In a corner, partially obscured by dust and debris, was the faint outline of a circle with strange symbols etched into the floor. As they examined it, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, warning them to leave. Chapter 6. The ritual. Fearful but resolute, John and Sarah decided to complete the ritual Edgar had started. They gathered the necessary items from Edgar's journal: candles, herbs, and a ceremonial knife. As night fell, they prepared the circle, following Edgar's instructions to the letter. They began the ritual, chanting the Inca. The haunting of Ashgrove Manor. Prologue. Nestled deep within the rolling hills of rural England, Ashgrove Manor stood as a monument to a bygone era. Its grand, Gothic architecture loomed over the landscape, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets long buried. For decades, the manor had stood abandoned, a forgotten relic slowly being reclaimed by nature. Local legend told of a malevolent spirit that haunted its halls, a remnant of a tragic past that had left its mark on the very stones of the manor. Chapter 1. The inheritance. When Emily Thornton received the letter informing her that she had inherited Ashgrove Manor from a distant relative, she was both surprised and intrigued. A freelance writer with a penchant for the mysterious, Emily saw the manor as an opportunity to escape the monotony of her urban life and perhaps find inspiration for her next novel. Ignoring the warnings of friends and the dark tales told by the villagers, she decided to spend a month at Ashgrove to explore its history and unlock its secrets. The day she arrived, the sky was overcast and a chill hung in the air. As her taxi wound its way up the gravel drive, Emily caught her first glimpse of the manor. It was grand yet foreboding, with ivy-covered walls and turrets that seemed to pierce the sky. The front door creaked ominously as she pushed it open, revealing a grand foyer filled with dust-covered furniture and the faint smell of decay. Chapter 2. The first night. That first night, as Emily unpacked her belongings in the master bedroom, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, and the house groaned as if in pain. She lit a fire in the bedroom's ancient hearth and settled into an armchair with a book, hoping to distract herself from the eerie atmosphere. As the hours passed and the firelight flickered, Emily began to hear faint whispers. She strained to listen, but the words were indistinct, like a conversation held just out of earshot. Dismissing it as the wind playing tricks on her, she went to bed, pulling the heavy blankets up to her chin. Sleep came fitfully, filled with strange, unsettling dreams. Chapter 3. The discovery. The next morning, Emily awoke to find the house bathed in an eerie silence. Determined to explore, she ventured into the manor's many rooms. Most were filled with dust and cobwebs, untouched for years. In the library, she discovered a collection of old books and journals, some dating back centuries. One journal, in particular, caught her eye. It belonged to her great-great-grandfather, Lord Henry Ashgrove, the original owner of the manor. As she read through the pages, Emily uncovered the tragic story of the Ashgrove family. Lord Henry had been a wealthy and influential man, but his life had been marked by sorrow. His beloved wife, Lady Eleanor, had died under mysterious circumstances, and their only child, Eliza, had vanished shortly afterward. Rumors of a family curse began to circulate, and the manor fell into disrepair after Lord Henry's death. Emily's curiosity grew with each revelation, and she resolved to uncover the truth behind the family's dark past. That night, she returned to the library to continue her research. As she pored over the journal, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, wrapping around her like a shroud. Chapter 4. The apparition. The third night, Emily's sleep was shattered by a loud crash. She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding, and listened. The house was silent once more, but she could feel a presence lingering in the darkness. Grabbing a flashlight, she crept through the hallways, following the faint sound of sobbing in the grand hall. She saw her. A ghostly figure of a woman in a flowing white gown, her face hidden by a veil of dark hair. The apparition stood by the grand piano, her fingers moving over the keys without a sound. Emily froze, fear gripping her heart, but the ghost paid her no mind. As she watched, the figure slowly faded away, leaving the room colder than before. Determined to find answers, Emily delved deeper into the manor's history over the following days. She uncovered old letters and photographs, piecing together the tragic story of Lady Eleanor and her daughter, Eliza. The more she learned, the more she felt the weight of their sorrow and the sense of unfinished business that lingered in the house. Chapter 5. The seance convinced that the spirits of Lady Eleanor and Eliza were trying to communicate with her. Emily decided to hold a seance. She invited her friend, Clara, a psychic medium, to the manor. Clara arrived with an array of candles, crystals, and other mystical paraphernalia. Together, they set up a circle in the dining room, lighting candles and holding hands as Clara began to chant. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. Clara's voice took on an otherworldly quality as she called out to the spirits. "Lady Eleanor, Eliza, we seek your presence. Tell us your story." The flames flickered, and a chill breeze swept through the room. Emily felt a pressure on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, Clara's eyes rolled back, and she spoke in a voice not her own. "She was taken from me, my Eliza." The darkness consumed her. Emily's heart raced as the ghostly figure of Lady Eleanor appeared before them. "You must find her," she whispered. "Free her from the darkness." Chapter 6. The hidden room. Spurred on by the seance, Emily and Clara searched the manor for clues. They discovered a hidden room behind a bookshelf in the library. Inside, the walls were lined with ancient tomes and strange artifacts. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished with a G. As Emily approached the mirror, she felt a strange pull, as if it were calling to her. She touched the glass, and a wave of energy surged through her, revealing a hidden compartment behind the mirror. Inside, they found a small, intricately carved box. Opening it, they discovered a locket containing a portrait of Eliza and a note from Lady Eleanor, begging whoever found it to save her daughter from the curse that had claimed her. Chapter 7. The confrontation. That night, Emily and Clara prepared to confront the dark force that held Eliza captive. They returned to the dining room and set up another seance, this time using the locket and the note as a focal point. As they began the ritual, the air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. The candles flickered violently, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive. The ghostly figure of Lady Eleanor appeared once more, her eyes filled with desperation. "Save her," she pleaded, her voice echoing through the room. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and a dark, malevolent presence filled the room. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with a sinister red light. "She is mine," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. Emily and Clara stood their ground, reciting the incantations they had found in the hidden room. The shadow writhed and twisted, its form shifting and contorting. As the ritual reached its climax, the locket in Emily's hand began to glow, casting a brilliant light that pierced the darkness. With a final, anguished scream, the shadow was banished, leaving the room in silence. Lady Eleanor's spirit appeared one last time, her expression one of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered before fading away. Chapter 8. The resolution. The next morning, Emily awoke to a sense of peace that had eluded her since her arrival at Ashgrove Manor. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the manor seemed brighter, almost welcoming. She and Clara spent the day cleaning and restoring the hidden room, preserving the artifacts and journals they had found. As Emily prepared to leave the manor, she felt a deep connection to her ancestors and a newfound respect for the power of the past. She knew that the story of Ashgrove Manor was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it. Epilogue. Years later, Emily published a novel based on her experiences at Ashgrove Manor. It became a bestseller, captivating readers with its blend of history, mystery, and supernatural intrigue. She often returned to the manor, now restored to its former glory, to write and find inspiration. Ashgrove Manor, once a place of sorrow and fear, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. Its dark past had been illuminated by the courage and determination of one woman who dared to confront the shadows. The manor stood as a testament to the enduring power of love and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. The haunting of Evershade House. Prologue. In the heart of a sprawling, dense forest in upstate New York stood Evershade House, an ancient mansion that had long been the subject of ghost stories and eerie legends. Built in the late 1800s by the wealthy Ellsworth family, the house had seen decades of opulence before tragedy struck. The entire family vanished without a trace one fateful night, leaving the mansion to fall into disrepair. Over the years, locals whispered of strange occurrences and ghostly apparitions, but no one dared to set foot within its grounds. Chapter 1. The new inhabitants. In the summer of 2023, the Daniels family decided to move into Evershade House. Dr. Robert Daniels, an esteemed historian, had been fascinated by the mansion's history and saw it as an opportunity to conduct research while restoring the house to its former glory. His wife, Margaret, and their teenage children, Emma and Jack, were less enthusiastic but supportive of his ambitions. The family arrived on a bright, sunny day. The house loomed before them, its grandeur still evident despite the years of neglect. Ivy climbed its stone walls, and the windows stared out like vacant eyes. As they stepped inside, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Dust motes floated in the shafts. The haunting of Hollowbrook House. Prologue. The edge of a forgotten town nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains stood Hollowbrook House. Once a grand estate, it had fallen into ruin, overgrown by nature and abandoned by all who had ever lived there. The house was a relic of a bygone era, with its crumbling turrets and ivy-covered walls whispering of secrets and sorrow. Locals spoke of it only in hushed tones, warning of the malevolent spirit that haunted its halls. Chapter 1. The arrival. In the summer of 2024, the Mitchell family moved to Hollowbrook. Dr. Thomas Mitchell, a professor of folklore, had bought the house as part of a project to explore the legends of haunted locations. His wife, Laura, an artist, saw the decaying mansion as an inspiring subject, and their teenage daughter, Lily, reluctantly accompanied them, more interested in her phone than the adventure. Their first glimpse of Hollowbrook House was eerie. The trees cast long shadows in the late afternoon light, and the house seemed to loom over them, its dark windows like vacant eyes. The front door creaked ominously as they entered, revealing an interior coated in dust and cobwebs, yet still holding a faded grandeur. Chapter 2. Uneasy beginnings. The first few days were spent cleaning and unpacking. Thomas was thrilled by the old books and artifacts left behind, while Laura found inspiration in the decaying beauty of the house. Lily, however, felt uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and the house seemed to groan and whisper at night, keeping her awake. One evening, as Laura painted in what once had been a grand ballroom, she noticed a figure reflected in the cracked mirror above the fireplace. Turning quickly, she found nothing. Yet, the feeling of being observed persisted, and she couldn't shake the image of a pale woman in a tattered dress. Chapter 3. The journal. While exploring the attic, Thomas discovered an old, leather-bound journal. It belonged to Eleanor Holloway, the original mistress of the house. Her entries detailed a descent into madness, starting with the death of her husband, Captain Jonathan Holloway, in a mysterious shipwreck. Eleanor wrote of strange occurrences in the house: footsteps in empty rooms, cold drafts, and the feeling of being watched. As Thomas read further, Eleanor's writings became increasingly erratic. She spoke of a dark presence that haunted her, driving her to the brink of insanity. The final entry was particularly disturbing. "He is here, in the shadows. He whispers to me, promises me release. I fear I shall never be free of him." Chapter 4. The hauntings begin. The manifestations began subtly. Doors opened and closed on their own, cold spots appeared in the hallways, and objects moved inexplicably. One night, Lily woke to the sound of whispering. As she listened, she realized it was coming from beneath her bed. Summoning her courage, she looked underneath but found nothing. However, the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. Laura, too, had unsettling experiences. The figure she had seen in the mirror began to appear more frequently, always just at the edge of her vision. She started to hear a mournful wailing at night, as if someone were crying out in despair. Chapter 5. The seance. Desperate for answers, Thomas contacted a renowned medium, Madame LeBlanc, to help them communicate with the spirits. Madame LeBlanc arrived with a sense of purpose, her presence commanding and mysterious. She set up a seance in the dining room, lighting candles and placing them in a circle. As the family joined hands with Madame LeBlanc, the room grew colder. She began to chant softly, calling out to the spirits of Hollowbrook House. The flames of the candles flickered, and a palpable tension filled the air. Suddenly, a ghostly figure materialized in the center of the circle. It was Eleanor Holloway, her face twisted in anguish. "He won't let me rest," she whispered. "He is the darkness that consumes this place." Madame LeBlanc asked who he was, but before Eleanor could answer, a shadowy figure appeared beside her. Its presence was suffocating, and the air seemed to vibrate with malevolence. The figure lunged at the family, and the seance was broken as the candles were extinguished in a rush of cold air. Chapter 6. Uncovering the truth. Shaken but determined, Thomas dove deeper into his research. He discovered that Captain Jonathan Holloway had been involved in dark practices, attempting to harness supernatural forces. His obsession led him to a cursed artifact, a black stone rumored to grant immense power at a terrible cost. Jonathan's ship had not been wrecked by natural causes, but by the dark forces he had unleashed. The curse had followed him to Hollowbrook House, binding his spirit and driving Eleanor to madness. The dark presence haunting the house was Jonathan, trapped and tormented by his own actions. Chapter 7. The confrontation. Armed with this knowledge, Thomas and Madame LeBlanc devised a plan to banish Jonathan's spirit and lift the curse. They needed to find and destroy the black stone hidden somewhere in the house. As they searched, the hauntings intensified. The shadowy figure of Jonathan appeared more frequently, his rage palpable. One stormy night, they found the stone hidden in the basement, its black surface pulsing with a sinister energy. They gathered around it, chanting the incantations Madame LeBlanc had prepared. The house shook, and Jonathan's spirit materialized. More terrifying than ever, he roared in fury, but as the incantations continued, his form began to waver. With a final, desperate scream, he lunged at Thomas, but the black stone shattered, releasing a blinding light that enveloped the room. When the light faded, Jonathan was gone, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Chapter 8. Peace restored. In the days that followed, Hollowbrook House felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less menacing. The ghostly apparitions ceased, and the whispers fell silent. The house, once a place of darkness and despair, was now a home. Thomas wrote a detailed account of their experiences, which was later published as a best-selling book. Laura's paintings, inspired by the haunting, received critical acclaim, and Lily, once skeptical, found herself fascinated by the supernatural. The Mitchell family had faced the darkness of Hollowbrook House and emerged stronger. And renewal. The legend of the haunted mansion persisted, but the spirits within had finally found peace. Epilogue. Years later, Hollowbrook House stood as a testament to the power of courage and determination. Visitors came to see the place where the Mitchell family had confronted and defeated the darkness. The house, once a symbol of terror, became a beacon of hope and inspiration. The story of Hollowbrook House was no longer one of horror but of triumph. It reminded all who heard it that even in the darkest places, light could prevail, and that the past, no matter how haunting, could be faced and overcome. Shadows of the past. Haunted tales of Crestwood. Crestwood, a city nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, is a place where the past and present intertwine in eerie and mysterious ways. Founded in the early 1800s, Crestwood has a rich history filled with tales of prosperity, tragedy, and the supernatural. The city's cobblestone streets, Victorian mansions, and abandoned factories are the perfect backdrop for ghostly legends that have been passed down through generations. Here are some of Crestwood's most chilling haunted stories. Point 1. The Phantom of Crestwood Manor. Crestwood Manor, a grand Victorian mansion perched atop a hill overlooking the city, has long been rumored to be haunted by the ghost of its original owner, Samuel Bradford. Bradford, a wealthy industrialist, built the manor in the late 1800s. According to local legend, Bradford was a stern and unforgiving man who met a mysterious and violent end within the walls of his opulent home. Visitors and residents of Crestwood Manor have reported strange occurrences over the years. Doors slam shut on their own, cold drafts sweep through rooms without explanation, and disembodied footsteps echo through the hallways. The most unsettling encounters involve sightings of a shadowy figure in a top hat, believed to be the restless spirit of Samuel Bradford himself. Some say he roams the manor, eternally searching for something or someone lost to him in life. Point 2. The tragic tale of Lila Montgomery. Lila Montgomery, a young woman from a prominent Crestwood family, fell in love with a sailor named Jack Hartwell in the early 1900s. Their love story was the talk of the town, but it ended in tragedy when Jack's ship was lost at sea. Heartbroken, Lila would often be seen wandering the shores, waiting for her beloved to return. One stormy night, Lila vanished without a trace. Her body was never found, but many believe she drowned in her sorrow. To this day, residents of Crestwood report seeing a ghostly figure of a woman in a white dress standing by the waterfront, staring out to sea. The specter is said to be Lila, eternally waiting for Jack's return. 3. The Cursed Factory. The old Crestwood textile factory, once a bustling hub of activity, now stands abandoned and decaying. In its heyday, the factory provided jobs for much of the town's population, but it also harbored dark secrets. Workers toiled under harsh conditions, and several accidents led to numerous deaths and injuries. The factory's most notorious story involves a fire that broke out in the early 1900s, trapping dozens of workers inside. Many perished in the blaze, and their anguished cries are said to echo through the crumbling structure to this day. Visitors who dare to enter the factory report hearing the sounds of machinery clanking and the faint screams of those who died in the inferno. Some have even